Imagine you're sitting beside a fire 40,000 years ago. The night is freezing. The only thing standing between you and death is the fire. Smoke fills your eyes. You cough. You wave it away. You hate it. Now imagine someone telling you one day billions of people will choose to breathe smoke into their lungs. You'd probably think they were insane. Yet today, over 1 billion people do exactly that. So, who was the first person who ever smoked? And why would anyone willingly inhale smoke in the first place?
Most people imagine ancient humans sitting around campfires, smoking tobacco. But here's the surprising truth. For almost all of human history, nobody smoked. Humans have existed for roughly 300,000 years. We learned to control fire hundreds of thousands of years ago. We cooked with it, we stayed warm with it, we used it to scare away predators. But deliberately inhaling smoke? That came much, much later. Thousands of years later. So where did the idea come from? To answer that, we need to go somewhere completely unexpected.
Long before cities, long before farming, fire was humanity's greatest invention. Without it, winter became deadly. Food stayed raw. Predators became fearless. Fire changed everything. It cooked meat. It made food safer. It gave humans more energy. Some scientists even believe cooking helped our brains grow larger over thousands of generations. But fire had another side. Smoke. Smoke irritated the eyes. It made breathing difficult. Ancient humans usually tried to avoid breathing too much of it. If you've ever sat beside a campfire, you know exactly why. So why would anyone later decide, I should breathe even more of this? The answer wasn't the smoke. It was what was inside the smoke.
Humans have always experimented with plants. Some cured pain, some healed wounds, others tasted terrible, and some did something very strange. Imagine throwing a handful of dried leaves into a fire. The smoke smells different, sweeter, stronger. Someone leans closer. They breathe it in. Minutes later, their body feels different. Maybe calmer, maybe more energetic, maybe dizzy. Maybe they begin seeing visions. That moment could have changed history forever. Because humans slowly realized some plants didn't just feed the body, they changed the mind.
Long before doctors, people relied on nature. Every forest was a pharmacy. Leaves, roots, flowers, tree bark. Ancient healers tested thousands of plants. Most didn't work. Some were poisonous, but a few seemed almost magical. They reduced pain, helped people sleep, stopped coughing, lowered fevers. Over generations, knowledge spread. Certain plants became sacred, and in many cultures, smoke itself became medicine. People believed breathing medicinal smoke could drive sickness out of the body. Today, we know many of these beliefs weren't scientifically accurate, but for ancient people, it made perfect sense. If smoke could carry a scent, maybe it could carry healing too.
But here's the biggest surprise. The plant that would eventually change human history didn't grow in Europe. It didn't grow in Africa. And it didn't come from Asia. Its story begins thousands of kilometers away. In the Americas. Long before Columbus ever sailed across the ocean, ancient civilizations had already discovered a leaf that would one day conquer the entire world. And that's where our story really begins.
Long before Europeans had ever heard the word tobacco, the Americans were already home to hundreds of thriving cultures. Some were small bands of hunter-gatherers. Others built enormous cities, temples, and trade networks. And hidden among the forests grew a plant unlike any other. Its leaves looked ordinary. Its flowers were beautiful. But inside those leaves was a chemical that could completely change how a person felt. That chemical was nicotine. While tobacco wasn't invented by humans, nature created it millions of years before we ever existed. But the plant wasn't trying to help us. In fact, nicotine evolved as a defense. When insects tried to eat the leaves, the nicotine poisoned or discouraged them. It was the plant's natural pesticide. Humans, however, discovered something unexpected. In small amounts, nicotine didn't kill them. Instead, it created a strange feeling. Some people felt more alert, others felt relaxed, some experienced lightheadedness. To ancient people, this wasn't just a plant. It seemed supernatural.
No one knows the name of the first human who intentionally smoked tobacco. History never recorded it. But imagine what that moment might have looked like. Perhaps it happened by accident. A few dried leaves fall into the fire. The smoke smells unusual. Someone leans closer. They breathe it in. Immediately, they cough. Their eyes water. Everyone laughs. The experiment seems like a failure. But then, minutes later, something changes. Their heartbeat feels different. Their thoughts seem sharper, or perhaps calmer. Curiosity wins. The next day, they try again. And again. Sometimes the greatest discoveries in history begin with simple curiosity.
For many ancient cultures, smoking wasn't entertainment. It wasn't a habit. And it certainly wasn't an addiction in the modern sense. It was sacred. Many tribes believed that smoke carried prayers into the heavens. As the smoke rose, so did their words. Hunters asked for success. Families prayed for rain. Healers asked the spirits to cure illness. The rising smoke became a bridge, connecting Earth to the sky. Whether those beliefs were true or not, they shaped entire civilizations.
At first, people may have simply thrown leaves into a fire, but eventually, someone had a better idea. What if we could control the smoke? So they carved hollow reeds, then wooden tubes, then beautifully crafted pipes made from stone and clay. These weren't just tools. Some became works of art, decorated with animals, spirits, and symbols of power. Owning a ceremonial pipe wasn't just practical, it was an honor. Some pipes were so valuable, they were buried alongside their owners.
For centuries, no one knew exactly how old smoking really was. Then, archaeologists made an incredible discovery. Tiny traces of ancient tobacco were found preserved inside stone pipes. Evidence suggests that people in the Americas were using tobacco thousands of years ago, possibly more than 12,000 years ago, making it one of the oldest known smoking traditions in human history. That means long before the pyramids of Egypt, long before the Roman Empire, and long before Europe ever encountered tobacco, humans were already gathering around fires, watching smoke rise into the sky.
By now, tobacco had become far more than just another plant. To many ancient cultures, it was a gift from the spirit world. Not everyone was allowed to use it. In many tribes, tobacco was reserved for shamans, healers, chiefs, or special ceremonies. It wasn't something people reached for out of boredom. It was something they approached with respect. Before lighting a pipe, some offered prayers. Others thanked nature, because they believed tobacco wasn't merely producing smoke. It was carrying messages. Thousands of years ago, there were no hospitals, no antibiotics, no pharmacies. When someone became sick, the healer was their only hope. Ancient healers believed tobacco possessed powerful medicinal properties. It was used to ease pain, treat insect bites, reduce toothaches, and even drive away what they believed were evil spirits causing illness. Sometimes the leaves were chewed. Sometimes they were brewed into mixtures. Sometimes they were burned so the smoke surrounded the patient. Today, modern science tells us tobacco is harmful when used this way over time. But ancient people didn't have laboratories. They relied on observation, tradition, and generations of experience. Imagine meeting strangers. You don't speak their language. You don't know if they're friendly or dangerous. One wrong move could start a war. So how do you show peace? For many Native American cultures, the answer was simple: share tobacco. Passing a ceremonial pipe became a symbol of trust. It meant, I come with respect. The smoke wasn't just entering their lungs, it was sealing an agreement. Sometimes a single pipe prevented a battle. Pipes weren't the only invention. Some ancient cultures discovered another method. Instead of carving stone, they rolled dried tobacco leaves inside larger plant leaves. Then they lit one end and inhaled from the other. In other words, they had invented an early version of the cigar. Simple, portable, effective. Centuries later, when European explorers arrived in the Americas, this was one of the first smoking methods they witnessed. Little did they know, they were looking at an invention that would eventually spread across the globe. Smoking wasn't the only way tobacco was used. People chewed it, sniffed powdered tobacco, burned it in ceremonies, left it as an offering to rivers, mountains, and forests. Some hunters scattered tobacco before entering the woods, asking nature for permission to hunt. Others buried leaves with loved ones, believing the gift would accompany them into the next world. To many cultures, tobacco wasn't simply valuable, it was sacred. For thousands of years, tobacco remained a secret of the Americas. Europe knew nothing about it. Africa had never seen it. Asia had never smelled its smoke. The rest of the world carried on, completely unaware that one small green leaf would one day reshape economies, influence empires, spark global trade, and become one of the most controversial plants in human history. But that was about to change, because across the ocean, sails were appearing on the horizon, and with them, history itself was about to take a dramatic turn. The year was 1492. After weeks at sea, Christopher Columbus and his crew finally reached islands in the Caribbean. Everything they saw was unfamiliar. New animals, new plants, new cultures. Then, they noticed something strange. Some of the local people were carrying bundles of dried leaves. Others were lighting them and breathing in the smoke. To the Europeans, it looked bizarre. Why would anyone willingly inhale smoke? They had no idea. They were witnessing a tradition that had already existed for thousands of years. The explorers didn't just bring back stories, they brought back tobacco. At first, it was rare, exotic, almost mysterious. Kings wanted to see it, doctors wanted to study it, merchants saw an opportunity. Before long, tobacco seeds were being planted far beyond the Americas. Within a few generations, a sacred plant used in ancient ceremonies had become an international trade item. Its journey had only just begun. Here's one of the strangest parts of the story. For centuries, many people believed tobacco was medicine. Some doctors recommended it for headaches. Others claimed it could help with toothaches, stomach problems, even breathing disorders. People smoked it, chewed it, ground it into powders. Some even believed tobacco could protect them from deadly diseases. Today, that sounds unbelievable. But remember, this was long before modern medicine. People relied on observation, tradition, and trial and error. Sometimes they were right. Sometimes they were spectacularly wrong. As the centuries passed, smoking changed. It was no longer reserved for ceremonies or special occasions. It became an everyday habit. The invention of manufactured cigarettes made tobacco cheaper and easier to buy than ever before. Millions of people started smoking. Then millions became billions. But over time, scientists began noticing a disturbing pattern. Heavy smokers were developing serious illnesses far more often than non-smokers. Decades of research eventually confirmed what ancient people could never have known. While nicotine creates dependence, the smoke from burning tobacco contains many harmful chemicals that increase the risk of diseases, including lung cancer, heart disease, and chronic lung conditions. The sacred leaf had become one of the world's biggest public health challenges. Isn't it strange? The first people who smoked probably never imagined their tradition would spread across every continent. For them, tobacco was connected to ceremonies, healing, nature, and community. It wasn't something used every hour of every day. Thousands of years later, the context had completely changed. The same plant, now grown on massive farms, sold around the world, and consumed by millions every single day. History has a funny way of transforming ideas, sometimes beyond recognition. So, when did humans first start smoking? Not in the Ice Age, not when fire was first discovered, but thousands of years later. Among the ancient peoples of the Americas, who turned an ordinary-looking plant into a sacred part of their culture. What began as ritual became trade. What became trade became a global habit. And what became a global habit changed human history forever. The next time you see smoke rising into the sky, Remember, its story began thousands of years ago with one curious human wondering what would happen if they breathed it in. If you enjoyed this journey into ancient history, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more stories about how our ancestors lived, survived, and shaped the modern world. Because history isn't just about the past, it's the story of how we became who we are today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure.